So the theme is getting to peace with the world situation. And like I said at the last talk, I am not going to be talking about specifics of what is actually going on in the world, partly because that can end up in endless discussions, but also because I've been listening to a lot of videos and talks about what people think is going on in the world, and almost every topic I've looked at, I've seen another video that says exactly the opposite. So I have no idea what to believe. I mean, there are a few things that one can say is actually true, like, for example, Trump getting elected. We know that, right? But most of the other stuff, I'm not sure, so we won't get into that. The idea of this talk, getting together, is to explore the collective consciousness, as Lisbeth was saying. What's going on in the collective mind in the world, and why are we going through a very intense time, and where is this leading to? Right? So this is a talk about hope, but also the process that we're in. I virtually have no fear about the world situation. The more I look at it, the more excited I become about it. And I have looked at it a lot. I've looked at the very worst of what I believe is possibly going on. I've heard from a number of channels that we are at the end of a spiritual cycle, actually. I believe that we are going into something like an Aquarian age. And I'll try not to be too specific because, of course, no one knows, but it could be for a long period. But it might take a little while before we get there, because there's a lot of undoing to do. Just like with healing our bodies, we might heal the mind, but the body can take some time to detox itself from everything that it's built up in the stress phase. I would like to explore the collective mind. Yeah, we have to understand the mind to get to real peace, believe it or not. Generally speaking, understanding is the booby prize of the universe. But the one thing that we need to understand is how the mind works. And to realize that we are actually all the same. We're all part of one mind, like a hologram. There's a bit of me in everyone, and there's a bit of you in me. And the same with everyone on the planet. And I'm working with a book, a mind training book called The Course in Miracles. Please raise your hand if you haven't heard of it.
Oh.
I know you have. Raise your hand again. Okay, a couple of people, right. This is possibly one of the most radical teachings that's ever come through. It's supposed to have come through the mind of Jesus, the one that was here 2,000 years. This was his real teaching, not what's in the Bible. A lot of the Bible has been manipulated and changed, but this is his original teaching, come through in the 60s. And it's a mind training system, and it's telling us what's going on in the mind and how to learn true forgiveness. So let me begin. And in order for us, what I'm alluding to is that we're all the same. So everyone involved in the world is also the same. All the politicians, all the ruling elite who seem to own most of the money in the world, they have the same mind as we have, right? And we need to realize that and accept that. And how this mind works is we all have two voices that we listen to. We have the ego voice, and this is slightly different terminology to ego from a psychotherapist point of view. But the ego voice is the voice of separation in our mind, right? And we all have that voice we can choose. We also have the voice of spirit. or the voice of oneness available in our mind. So we all have these two voices that we can listen to. Now, who is it that's choosing between these two? It's you. It's us. We are choosing all of the time one of those two voices. You're either choosing separation or connection. And believe it or not, we're choosing separation a lot more than we think we are. Every time we judge, every time we defend ourselves, every time we need to be right, every time we need to be wrong, every time we defend ourselves, every time we attack, we are separating ourselves from everyone else, but particularly the one that you're talking to at that moment. So whether you're a president, politician, what we would describe as a really bad guy in the world, is also, he or she is also choosing between these two voices. Depending on our experience of life, how we were born, how we were received, most especially how we were received as we're taking our first breath, for example, how our parents treated us, whether they were a very loving couple, whether they stayed together and respected your wishes and your ambitions and your passions and your feelings. My father was a defense lawyer in Scotland. He defended many criminals, some murderers. And he was of the philosophy that punishment actually is not the answer. He witnessed many people that went to prison. He wasn't able to get everyone off. He was a pretty good lawyer, but he didn't get everyone off. But many that went to prison came out and did exactly the same thing. They didn't really learn anything because they were treated actually very badly in prison. You become very lonely, very separate, very pushed down. So very few people, and there are some, very few people can learn from being punished. Nelson Mandela would possibly be one. He was able to, when he went into prison, he was pretty connected, but there was part of him that was a real fighter. But when he came out of prison, he saw everyone as the same. Black, white, coloured, Indian. That's all the same. So it is possible. But he had the tools to do that. What is not generally known is that the ego voice has one goal, and that is separation. It's the voice of separation. So it has one goal, and it's very good at doing it. In fact, the ego voice is better at choosing separation than we are at not choosing the ego voice. It's extremely good. And especially if we've had a childhood where we haven't been fully respected and loved and held and nurtured, we will choose the ego voice more than someone who was loved and held and respected. And we all know that. This is not new. I have heard that those, what we would call bad guys in the world, have had horrific childhoods. And they have grown up with it, and it has become their norm. It has become part of them. And so, of course, they continue to do it, because who would I be without my experience and my belief system? So we have to be very accepting of everything that's going on in the world. The ego script is founded in what's called the unholy trinity. That comes from this blue book. The unholy trinity of sin, guilt, and fear. And it comes from, this is very deeply buried, but I believe that I have sinned by separating from God, from source. I'm therefore guilty and I deserve punishment. And if you look at the Christian theology, it's based on sin, guilt, and fear. Right? This is why there have been so many religious wars. So be careful of the Bible. The Bible teaches sin, guilt, and fear. This teaches only love. Well, actually, how to remove the blocks to love. See, love is our natural state. Being in our right mind, you could call it, is our natural state. And all we have to do is train our mind to choose away from the ego voice. And what is left is love. So I'll just read the introduction paragraph. It's very short. This course does not aim at teaching the meaning of love. And there's 1,100 pages. It does aim, however, at removing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence, which is our natural inheritance. So it's all about removing the blocks. This is why I invite you to look at your reactions and your fears to what's going on in the world. That's what we need to look at it gently. Because avoiding it and suppressing it doesn't help, because it's still there in your backpack. What we have to do to get to peace is bring everything out of our backpack, put it out on the table and look at it gently. Not with judgment, because otherwise you just keep perpetuating it, but to look at it, to look at all your reactions, all your fears, until there's no reaction to it anymore. And what was interesting is we all had, when we went round sharing, we all had a different way, a perception of looking at the world and our different fears. But if you look more closely, you'll see that is actually a reflection of your belief system. Right? So we're doing this to ourselves. Another aspect that I would like to look at with regard to what's happening in the world is that we're co-creating it. You know, the ego says they're doing it to me whenever they choose, whether it's the government or ruling elite or your parents or your school or Hjerterum, whatever it is, they're doing it to you. The truth is that we're co-creating everything. To have a victim, you need a victimizer. To have a victimizer, you need a victim. So we're complicit unconsciously to everything that's happening in the world. Everything. End of a spiritual cycle. This is what we're being told. And as I said at the last talk, something happened in the 60s in the Vatican. There was a ruling in the Vatican that said you were not allowed to study or teach spirituality or religion. This rule got repealed in the 60s. So suddenly it was okay to be a witch, if you like. Because before that, witches were burnt at the stake, and anybody teaching spirituality who wasn't in the church would get punished. This book also came out in the 60s. Rebirthing or breathwork also got discovered in the 60s, and probably a lot of other modalities came out at that time. Because, and also the coffee machines were invented in the 60s. So collectively, and again, it probably wasn't conscious, but it finishes on its own.
No, I was just concerned that
Yeah. Collectively, we unconsciously must have got to a point where we've had enough of being enslaved. We've had enough of being taxed, so that we're basically in a position of slavery, which we have been for hundreds of years, without knowing it. And we don't even know we're in a slave situation, because we grow up with our parents and our schooling, and everyone's being taxed. We think it's normal, right? So we don't fight it. But as I say, it feels like on some level we've had enough, so things have started to change. And as I said at the beginning, whenever there's a big change or a healing of a sickness, there's a big spike called a healing crisis. And I think that's what we're in now. This is why there's wars going on in the Middle East. This is why everything's happening in America, and so on and so forth. That's about as specific as I'm intending to get. But I think I think we're in a spike now, and it might look a lot worse for a little while, but I believe that it's going to get a lot better over the next period, right? Just like each of us, whatever belief system we have or patterns that we have, we hold on to them because they define us. Like, who would I be without my pain? Who would I be without my fear of death? Who would I be without my stuckness or whatever? And so there will be huge resistance to these changes, right? There will be. And that's actually what's happening now. This is why we get this healing crisis, is the ones that really want change and the ones that are really resisting it. That's what war is about, right? So, as I've been alluding to, and this is what Course in Miracles is teaching us, we have to bring the darkness to the light. What many modalities have been doing, and religion and so on, is bringing the light into the darkness, trying to shine the light onto the darkness. That just simply perpetuated. We have to bring our darkness, our own darkness. This is why we're looking at our reactions and our fears. Bring our darkness up to the light of our gentle mind, the witness mind, the non-judgmental mind, and simply look at it. And this is what Course in Miracles calls true forgiveness. It's the gentle looking. It calls the old form of forgiveness, that's where you have done something and I'm going to forgive you for it. It calls that forgiveness to destroy, because it actually keeps us separate. You have done something. We're not going to question that, but I'll forgive you for it, right? This is an ego trick, and we've been doing it for centuries. So this is taking us to a whole new level of forgiveness called true forgiveness, where you work actually with your own reactions, right? You may do something to me, right, around me, and I have a reaction to it. That's what I forgive. That's what I look at. Oh, there I go feeling hurt. You didn't do it to me. I'm doing this to myself in your presence. I'm responsible for my hurt. I'm responsible for my feeling excluded. I'm responsible for my shyness. I'm responsible for my anger and irritation, 100%. And this is what is called true forgiveness, is looking at my reactions, my fears, my doubts, gently, without judgment. And then they fade away because you're bringing them to the light of your right mind. And you could say, the reason that I've felt moved to give these talks is because, and I think Lisbeth was alluding to this, a lot of what's really going on in the world is going to be exposed fairly soon. Maybe with an emergency broadcast system. I don't know for sure, but I've been hearing a lot about it. And when this happens, if it does, a lot of people are going to be very upset because they're going to discover what's been happening behind the scenes. And so I ask the question to you, what is our role in a situation like this? If this has happened where suddenly there's a lot of very dark information revealed to the world, and we know that we're doing this to ourselves, what is our role here? Yeah.
Hold space.
Hold the space.
Yeah.
Hold the hands of the ones that are more fearful than we are. If only half of the things I've heard about are true, people are going to be very, very upset for a while. And we need this is one of the reasons I believe in Hjerterum, and will do whatever I can to make sure that it continues. because I think we have a very important function here, and that is to hold the space for what is about to happen. Again, I can't be sure. But my discernment, which I have to always question, is that this could happen early next year. We'll find out what's been going on, and then everyone who has not looked at this will be very angry or upset or afraid. Yeah. Right. But this is just a healing crisis, and we are moving. Once we get through this, there will be a beautiful period for maybe 1,000 years. Who knows?